All right, welcome to Simple Healthy Life, where our goal is to have real, insightful conversations on topics that we find interesting. And today, MJ, I did want to bring up a comment from one of our listeners on the Transformative Moments podcast that we did not too long ago, Kairos. And this one's from John, and I thought it was really interesting. So I'm just going to read it, and then maybe we can kind of chat about it. But he says, do you guys think that some form of negative self-talk could be part of that process in deciding to grab Kairos? So in deciding to transform or change, really is what he's saying. I've read that it's good to limit negative self-talk. When MJ looks down at himself after the shower, or Ryan stares at himself in the mirror in that decrepit bathroom, are your thoughts mostly positive and motivating? And if not, could negative self-talk be good in certain situations, assuming we are aware when it's happening? Only asking because negative self-talk seems to be impossible to avoid. And so just for context there, for the listeners who haven't heard that podcast before, what we had talked about is both our moments, kind of like recognizing to ourselves, hey, we weren't super happy with how things were going, and we had this kind of shift in perspective, this kind of like momentary change, and that's what we kind of labeled as Kairos. So what are your thoughts on that question? I thought it was really good.
That is a really great question. It's thanks for listening. Thanks for thinking about the examples that we gave. There's a lot of parts to that question. Specifically to answer your question about me in that moment, standing there in the shower, recognizing that I wanted to make a change about the way that my body was. I can remember it was actually anger. It was like that, F that. This is over for me. I'm no longer going to be playing the victim, no longer going to be living in this body that is overweight. But it was very much, post that, it was very much a positive self-talk moment. I can do this. This is F that. This is the time, and I'm going to do it. That's the first part of your question. The second part about kind of getting at like, can negative self-talk drive you? There's no doubt that there are plenty of examples in our own world, but I'll give probably the best one that I can think of off the top of my head is David Goggins. Right? If you've read Can't Hurt Me or listened to his podcasts, or he's driven by this negative self-talk, this negative perspective around himself. I'm terrible. I'm the bomb. I'm F my body and that type of stuff. And it clearly drives him. The stuff that he's been able to accomplish is incredible, right? The guy writes books about it and runs ultra marathons. But my question would be, is that good? Is he happy while he's doing it? Is he going to go back at the end of it all and say, man, I wish I could have been driven through love or through positive self-talk? So that's how I would like to think about the things that drive me. And you posed this question to me, so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what drives me. And number one, anger sometimes does, no doubt. This kind of like me against the world, like, but I'm angry about it, like, tell me I can't do that, like, rah. Yeah. Number two, positive self-talk. Telling myself, this is the way I can do this. I know I can do it. I'm capable of doing it. Those are kind of the two primary drivers. What about for you?
Yeah, and kind of to answer the same questions in the line, as I was, had that moment, that shift. There certainly were negative aspects, quote unquote negative aspects to that. I'm sure I felt a sense of shame and guilt and maybe anger a little bit, disappointment. I'm sure was there, but the overarching feeling that actually arose from the combination of everything that happened in that moment was empowerment, right? And you kind of even suggested it yourself, this like the transformation of victimhood to ownership, right? And that's exactly what it was. If I could like encompass that moment as, in a single sentence, it would be exactly that. And I remember thinking that one of the primary thoughts was, no one's coming to save me. And this is before I had even, you kind of hear that. Like I actually read that now. Like it's a kind of a popular thing. You've heard that before, right? Yeah. But this was before. I mean, YouTube wasn't even around at this time. So this was a while back. And I remember having that thought, like, no one's coming and saying, hey, I'm taking care of you. I'm going to solve your problems, because the fact of the matter is, no one is. Like the other people who care about you, sure, but your problems are your own, and for good reason. Like you're tasked with overcoming them and challenging yourself with that. So it certainly was like an empowering moment, although, I was in this place of disempowerment too. So it was this very weird dichotomy. And yeah, I mean, I think your example on Goggins is good, because he never does seem to say, well, I feel good about what I've done, and I know that I can do this, so I'm going to push myself harder to do it better next time or something, right? I think that there's a place for that. I think that negative self-talk can be impactful to certain people, and to John's point, it is impossible to avoid. I think it's just kind of happens, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to mean anything too, because it can quickly become dysregulated, right? Where you're just beating yourself up for no reason, right? You think, maybe you think that there's a reason, or maybe there is a good reason why you shouldn't feel good. Maybe you've done something treacherous, terrible. Maybe you have, but does it actually serve you to beat yourself up into a pulp and then, not then feel motivated to do whatever it is to kind of rectify the situation? And I think that's maybe the primary distinction there is, when is it regulated? When is it useful versus when does it become dysregulated and just harmful to who you are and yourself in general?
So when I think about this topic, I kind of want to maybe help the audience understand a couple things. And first thing you should understand as the audience is that everybody has negative self-talk, right? Mm-hmm. We know this. It's real. The second thing is that most of your negative self-talk comes from your belief system. And the third thing is that most of your belief system really came from before the age of 7 years old. They know this. This is documented science. And if you really think about the eyes of a 6-year-old, right, they're not able to articulate the way that they're feeling as well as we can. So you're believing these things about the way the world is, about the way that you interact with the world as if you were 6 years old. And when you start to really hone in and question those things, which so many of us don't do, we don't actually question ourselves to say, why do I believe that I'm not good enough? Why do I think, this thought about me not being good enough coming in my head, every day? Why? What's up with that? Why is it there? So the number one thing you can do is really start to, you said it best, go from victim to victor, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's in there. Let's deal with it. Let's figure it out. Let's ask ourselves, is there a way that I can challenge this belief about myself? Is there a way that I can uncover why I feel this way about myself? And are there positive reinforcement moments that say that's actually not true? Like, I'm not good enough. Look at all of these times that I've been good enough throughout my life. So that's one. The second thing, and a lot of people don't recognize this, is that there's actually, they have this pyramid. It's your thoughts, your actions, and your emotions. Emotions tie into this thing dramatically. And what most people don't recognize is that each one of those they're constantly driving your personal behavior. They're constantly making up your personal reality, and that is constantly making up your personal reality, your personality, who you are, those three things. And it's not any one of them that is in charge all the time. So for somebody that's out there thinking like, no, I think something, then I feel something, then I act on something. No, that's not how it works. It is how it works sometimes. Sometimes it's I feel something, then I think something, then I act on something. And sometimes it's I acted on something, then I thought something, then I felt something. So it's so much more than just a negative self-talk versus positive self-talk. It's really your entire personal reality, your entire belief system, and sitting down with it and saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to take ownership of all of the stuff that's going in there, even recognizing that maybe that theory that your thoughts are not your own, right? They come from wherever, and saying to yourself, all right, this is just part of who I am. Makes sense? I know I said a ton of stuff there.
Yeah, no, that it's a good way to think about it, and I like that you had mentioned, sometimes thoughts precede action. Sure, and sometimes action precedes thought, and throw the feeling variable in there too as kind of like wild card that pops up, and that's what people are challenged with a lot of the time when it comes to change and habits and whatever it might be, is that a lot of people wait for the feeling to then elicit the whatever change, whatever motivation there, but that isn't the case. It isn't the case that the feeling is going to be there in the way that you'd like it to be there. And so, I think it's such an interesting topic. I mean, it's almost so interesting that I have trouble like articulating where to go, because I kind of dislike the idea of hyper positive psychology where where we should only anticipate and the goal should be happiness, right? How many times you hear this? Well, I just want to be happy, right? Like, you just want to be happy. Wow. That's incredible. Like, good luck, because that is what other what other goal is as tremendous as that. That is a huge hill to kind of walk upon, I suppose, or hike. Happiness is a fleeting feeling in some regard, and it's great. It's great to feel that, and maybe maybe that should be part of the daily repertoire. Maybe that's what you mean. I want to feel happiness at times in a reasonable, healthy amount. But often is the case that you can't control how a day feels, but you can control what you do with the day. And so you could have the same day on repeat. You could do the exact same thing every single day, talk to the same exact people. Could be, one-to-one perfection each day, but you're probably going to feel differently just based on the nature of emotion. And so, what are those emotions then trying to tell you, right? And I think it's, I love the example of you bringing up like anger as like something that kind of drives you in some way, because commonly seen as a very negative emotion, and people will avoid that at all costs in a lot of ways. But for you found a way to use that, right? And it makes perfect sense, right? Like, I know we talked about this example earlier, but if someone's really crossing your boundaries and you feel angry, well, guess what? That's so useful, because then you can take that anger and you can have, I guess you can urge yourself to the confrontation and the conflict, and then get a resolution out of that. It makes perfect sense. But if someone's crossing your boundaries and you're feeling like completely at peace with that, I mean, maybe not the best, maybe not the best. Maybe some people would argue that that's helpful, but I don't know if I necessarily would agree with that. And so I think a lot of our emotions have a function, and to label them as good versus bad versus useful, not useful, I don't think is entirely, helpful for people.
No, and to take it one step further, that triangle we talked about, the T, the E, and the A, right?
Yeah.
The thoughts, the emotions, and the actions, like every one of those is, we as a society have labeled each one of those as being good or bad, right? Like, you have good thoughts and you have bad thoughts. You have good emotions, you have bad emotions. You have good actions, you have bad actions. But let's face it, 90% of the time, that we're going about our day, we're having all of those things, and they're not good or bad.
Right.
They're just what they are.
Mm.
And starting to recognize that scale where you start thinking, oh, that was a bad one. Like, oh, I don't like that one. Like, no, it's just what it is, right? And once you start to be able to do that, you can start to take ownership of it.
Mm.
Okay, I am my thoughts, I am my actions, I am my emotions, but I'm also something else, right? That's the part that we can all agree on, right? There's more to us. Why can we witness those things if we close our eyes and decide we want to witness our thoughts? Why is that possible? So disassociating from all three of those things allows you to choose the way you want to react to them. So yeah, there's some definite times where a negative self-talk can be a driver. If you say, all right, that's the thought that went through my head. Okay, I can handle that. Let's go get it. Let's be better than that thought. Or, oh man, that emotion, that feeling guilt around that emotion. Okay, all right, I can push myself harder. I can be better. I am a little bit upset that I quit last time when I was trying to do that thing, but okay, I can do it. Not just, yeah, no, I'm pissed because I didn't do that. Right? Like, it's more okay, yep, I see you in there. I can do it. I hear you. I feel you. I can do it. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. And actually what comes through very clearly as we kind of dissect this a little bit, and I'm so glad that we have, is that two words are jumping out for me in terms of perceived negative, positive emotions, and this is and self-talk, and these are meaning and judgment. And so, what is the meaning of this of whatever negative self-talk is happening? Because you're exactly right. We can't really control this. These things happen. It's so natural. In fact, we've thrown these figures out, but like 80% of our thoughts are negative. 95% of them are repetitive. So somewhere in that ballpark, you're experiencing hyper negative thoughts on a regular basis that you've had 100 times before, right? And so, what is the meaning of you beating yourself up because you quit the race or whatever it is, right? What is that? And so you say, wow, I'm so, I'm not, I gave up on myself, and that sucks, and I should have done better, and so on and so forth. But what is the meaning there? Is the meaning to then wallow in victimhood, or is the meaning perhaps, well, maybe I try something differently because I know that I'm capable of more, right? And when you mention, the earlier story, is that the route that our thoughts go, or do we go into this very dysregulated, I'm worthless, I'm valueless, no one likes me, I'm incapable of everything, or does that thought train then kind of take off and go, well, I can do more, I can challenge myself better, here's the actions I could do next time, and you're more productive with that. And so I think it's fair to say that there are trains of thought that can be perceived negative or positive, but both can be either destructive or maybe empowering is a good way to put it. So I think even on the thought specifically, I think there could be positive thoughts that are destructive, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's plenty of positive thoughts that are disruptive, especially when you are associating so closely with them. Like, this is me. I'm only going to think about, X, Y, and Z. And then what happens is you fail. The negative self-talk comes in, and then you get pissed at yourself. You're mad. You're like, no, I should have done this. I told myself I was only going to think about these, that being good. And what happens is you become associated with that, and then you get down on yourself, and then you go, the cycle continues. So I think that I think the best way for me personally is to recognize that I can disassociate with both of them, right? With the thoughts and the emotions, and step back and say, okay, this is happening. This is a thing. Now, how am I going to behave? What action am I going to take? And that action might be going back up in my own mind and saying, all right, stop that, guys. This isn't for me, right? Or it could be I'm going to physically get up off the couch and go do a thing, or I'm going to stop eating the way that I was eating, and the example I gave during the Kairos. But that pause, that react, that respond, not react, I think that allows the negative self-talk, to bring it back to the very beginning, that allows the negative self-talk to be a positive driver for me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. The cultivation of space between the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, to then how you react or act upon them. I think that's huge. And this is why we always say, well, you really should try meditation. You really should try journaling. You really should do these things, because whether you believe it to be true or not, you are creating space between who you think you are and who you actually are. And that's really, really important. It's a valuable tool. I think it's so interesting, so a lot of the parallels you draw between, like the positive quote unquote thoughts and the negative, quote unquote thoughts. Let me ask you a question. This is kind of interesting. Do you narrate your workings? Do you narrate your activities as you go about your day, like in your head?
I mean, like the example you give, sometimes you're like, I'm feeling anger right now. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like if you're gonna like pick up this water, do you go, I'm gonna drink some water right now, and or do you just do it?
Good question. No. I'm primarily in my default mode. I'm primarily thinking about the future and the past, and no.
Okay.
I'd like to say otherwise, but no. I'm certainly, the majority of the time I'm just like everybody else. I'm just in default mode, thinking about something that happened yesterday or something that's happening tomorrow. I hope to be a little better. I hope to that there's plenty of time during the day that I'm actually singularly focused on something and being present. But for the most part, much as I practice, I'm still there, forward and back.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious if you guys are listening to this and you narrate your actions. I'm going to the bathroom. I'm doing this. I'm wiping my butt. If you do that, let me know. I'm curious, because I think a lot of people do. I don't particularly, but I can almost, like, when I see people and talk to people and maybe observe how they act, it almost seems like that's the case for a lot of people, that they're narrating exactly what they do. And I'd be curious if you are, so please let me know. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, and maybe this is an important distinction as well, what's the difference between thoughts and thinking?
Well, I think thoughts are those things that come in. They just come in. There's very little you can do about it. You can't shut it down. And I think thinking is like a specific, desired line of thoughts. My intention is to get to the bottom of this. My intention is to figure out how to get Ryan to do this thing. So I'm going to think about the actions I need to make to talk to Ryan about getting him to do this thing. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yeah. That's how I view it too. And so when we're talking about negative thoughts being very natural, perhaps a negative thinking is one that you can control. And so maybe this is in line with kind of how we kind of are talking about this topic of, negative self-talk. I think negative self-talk thoughts can be very automatic, but you should be very, very careful of negative self-talk thinking, the action of beating yourself up, saying, you get this random thought with an emotion, and then you say, ooh, here's all the ways I'm terrible. And you go and you engage with that thought. It's very real. And I think that based on my conversations with so many people about how they perceive these things to be, I don't think people recognize that you're thinking about negative topics, either yourself or whatever, more than you'd like to admit. And I think that the thoughts are very natural, and the thoughts are you can't control it. You can get and people know this, like intrusive thoughts, drive off the cliff. Like, yeah, probably not you, probably not a you probably just you saw it on a movie or something, and it's just like pops up like, hey, here I'm here. And that's just kind of like your brain being active for whatever reason. But I do believe that thinking can be controlled in some regard, and you have to be very, very careful about negative thinking, especially when it's centric to yourself.
Okay, so I just solved the world's problems. You ready? Pay very close attention.
Totally. Yeah.
We know that the belief system, the majority of our beliefs are installed, created in us before the age of 7. We also know that these thoughts, we don't remember them, but they've been happening the whole time.
Sure.
We also know that it's super easy to go down and allow those negative thoughts to become negative thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And we also know that if you continuously have this negative thinking pattern, you start to formulate beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So last piece that ties it all together is how often or how easy is it to put it together that maybe you had all of these negative thinking patterns when you were 4, 5, 6, and eventually didn't know any better other than to say, man, I fell down today. I must not be good at walking. All right, I must not be as good as the other kid over there on the playground. How easy is it to think that that's happening all the time, and you're starting to develop these beliefs, and now it's up to us as adults, as people that are paying attention now, to reprogram and reevaluate and start to say, those are not true. Those are just the simple, easy way of a 5 and 6-year-old to go through life, because it's the easy thing to do is to think negative thoughts about ourselves because it's there for us all the time, but it's not actually true.
Yeah.
Did I put that together well enough?
Yeah, you did, and I think this it's so right for a lot of people. Maybe an example to kind of put it all into like a visionary structure. Say someone, is grouped as a child in 6th grade, just with people that, other kids that are in your region, whatever, your local area. And perhaps those other kids just, for whatever reason, don't have the same interests as you. You like drama and they all like sports or whatever. And you're forming beliefs at this age, actually. I mean, 6th grade maybe is a little bit, but I mean, you're still forming beliefs at that, throughout your whole life. But so then you start forming beliefs, I'm not like other kids. I'm not like other people. And this is very strong, and then kind of carries through many, many years. And then you get to adulthood with this same thought, the same belief, I'm not like other people. When in fact, I mean, you just kind of got unlucky. You didn't get into the classroom of kids who didn't like drama, and you are running your life, your personal realities based upon this like flawed logic of a 12-year-old, right? Yeah. And that's very true. I see this all the time with people who say like, I'm not, and I'll like encourage them to like, I don't know, go make friends or whatever, and they'll say, I'm really socially awkward. I'm not good at this. I'm like, what are you talking about? We have a great conversation, and you have no, like, I wouldn't even perceive you to be, like, I think you do just fine. And because I'm an outsider, I can say that, like, with full meaning, and I'm not gassing them up. It's like truth. It's the truth that they do just fine, but they have this such ingrained belief that they aren't capable of talking to other people just because they couldn't do it at some arbitrary young age.
Yeah, well said, man. Let's think about it for a second. And if you're out there and you're listening, take a moment. How many ways are you running your life based on the flawed logic of a 12-year-old? Right? Like, really, like, yeah. I got 2 or 3,
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I think that's a very valuable thing to do. And you remember when we had Lauren Folan on the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. She really was able to articulate this nicely for us, and I'm not going to do nearly as good a job, but, you're challenging your belief system, challenging the core of where you built everything off of, right? And remember that it's not, even your belief system's not really you, right? It's just the core of what you built everything off of. Challenging that is really hard. I mean, how easy is it to just go, that's just the way I am. That's just who I am.
I hate
right?
that. I hate that. This is like, that's my personal pet peeve. That's just the way I am. What do you mean by that?
Since when is the
Right,
question, right?
right.
Okay, since when? You were born this way? You're like, and what the funny thing is what they're telling you is what we know to be true.
Right.
Since before you can remember, you've had this belief system. But what we just kind of uncovered is it's likely based on this thoughts versus thinking pattern that you had when you couldn't articulate what was going on in your head, when you were just running it down because you got in the wrong class and turned out that the kids didn't like you because you weren't really interested in the same things that they were interested in, or these are just belief systems that are essentially, they are deep to our core, but they're really just where we started adding layers on. And we can start to unlayer ourselves, and we can start to peel back that self. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is like, if let's say you're listening, right, and you're like, everything we've said makes sense. Yes, everything we said makes sense. But everything we're saying is like making sense, right? So you go, where would I start? How would I start noticing? How would I start changing? How would I start discussing? And worse or more challenging than that is, what if it starts to work and I start to become different and I start to not be the same around the people that I have built my life around, right? The people that know me and know who I am, and all of a sudden I start to say, I don't really like that about myself. I think I'm going to change. And now all of a sudden my whole reality, my whole personal reality changes. My thoughts start to change. My emotions start, my actions. And then the people around me start to become more distant, or I become more distant from them. Like, there's a risk there. There's a risk reward for this game behavior, right?
Yeah.
What is that scary?
Yeah, but that's the burden that you have to bear, right? With any change, there's sacrifice, and that could be just simply sacrificing parts of yourself that you don't even like, yet that's still scary.
Yeah, because it makes up you.
Mm-hmm.
It is a scary thing to think about.
Which is why I really, and as I said, I really dislike that thought of that's just not who I am. That's not what I do. I can't stand this. I don't operate that way. It's just not true, right? And you start to kind of disassociate or pull back from, who you think you are versus who you actually are. And you recognize that who you actually are is just who you decide to be in each moment in some way. And so it's why I think it pigeonholes people into I can't stand that noise. I can't stand this. Like, you're just re-emphasizing that belief every time you say something like this. It's not true. You can gain tolerance. Everything is a skill. Every single thing that you can even imagine, your discomfort tolerance, your kindness, your ability to regulate emotions, every single thing is a skill. And so if you see it that way, then you start to recognize that, wow, I was fixed. I had a fixed mindset in almost, all these areas that I didn't even know were areas. I didn't even know that they were, they're intangible. I can't point to someone's discomfort tolerance or distress tolerance is what they would call it. And I can't point that out and take a digital reading of this, but it's there. And we should really work on building these little kind of tiny micro skills so that we're able to change effectively. When I was a kid, and I don't want to be like boastful, so I don't really like talking about it because I feel boastful, but I had a really terrible psychological minefield that I navigated through. I was like kind of a neglectful childhood, didn't really have very many friends, wasn't in a good spot with really anything. I had no like real tangible skills, and no one to support any kind of skill development. Yet, in this day and age, I, my mental landscape is I'm really proud of the work that I've done on that front. It's really quite intact, and that wasn't luck. I wasn't just born that way. In fact, I was born maybe the opposite. Maybe I had a proclivity to like a little bit more depressive thoughts, and I think that's probably fair to say. And yet I've navigated through in a way where I'm really, really careful about what I think about. My thoughts are my thoughts. I don't care what happens there. They're kind of interesting sometimes. They're kind of painful sometimes, but the thinking part is where things get muddy for people. And so, I even when it comes to, I still experience negative thinking patterns for sure, although not nowhere near what it once was. But I'm really, really careful as to like what that might mean for me. And so now this is actually, and so kind of getting to the actionable kind of advice, this might be helpful for people if you're kind of finding yourself stuck in negative thinking patterns. But anytime that I would think negatively about myself and start to beat myself up, I would attach an image to that, whereas the image could be something breaking, or like, for example, like I would sometimes picture like a house, and anytime I would notice this negative thinking pattern, I'd visualize like cracks in the foundation, just to remind myself that there is no productivity in beating myself up, even if it is true that I'm. Even if it is true, some people just don't have skills and their life is a mess, and they haven't really taken advantage of their time and they've squandered opportunities. It could be entirely true. That's a reality for some people, and it was a reality for myself at certain points too. Even if that's true, there is no productivity in beating yourself up. What are you going to do about it then? Beating yourself up is like is a coping strategy in some way, a very maladaptive, negative coping strategy. It's you feeling justified about it, and it's a very dangerous habit. And so I would use that kind of visualization structure, or like an egg. I would picture that kind of cracking anytime I catch myself in negative thinking, to remind myself that this isn't helpful, and perhaps let's do something else to kind of navigate out of here. If I really want to change, if I'm really feeling down, then go learn something or go work on a skill, right? That's where change happens.
That's great. And I hope that people will be able to take that, because you can do it right now. You can still use that same visual in your head when you start to beat yourself up. Mm. I think we've covered a lot in this podcast, and I'd love to say thank you to John for giving us this topic and allowing us to kind of go back and forth about it. I feel very much like it was nice to revisit some of the things we've thought about before. And I think that maybe if you're out there listening, maybe I'm going to try to spend a little time in reflection on some of the areas in my life that I'm pretty sure I started to believe before I could even tell you who I was, or where those layers started adding on to. Because there's some things about myself that I believe that I could certainly stand to let go. And maybe we'll do a podcast on some of those things next time.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. So to kind of put in the practices of reflection, I think is really, really important. This is why journaling is so nice, because it's structured time where you can think, right? Wow, how great. If you're caught in negative thinking patterns, just kind of on autopilot, it's just happening, it's just habitual. Well, maybe you put in some structured thinking time where that is, more actively, you're actively paying attention. You're maybe actively constructing some positive kind of thinking patterns there, and just reflecting on where things could change just to begin with, and just making sure that you're not ruminating. And then maybe, I don't know, creating some order in certain things, like cleaning parts of your house that are kind of messy. There's studies that show that really kind of like jumbles up our thinking. That makes sense. But yeah, no, it's kind of interesting. A lot of like what you bring up in terms of the childhood beliefs kind of lingering, and then those beliefs fitting into how we fitting in some way to how we live our lives, although just so disturbed to begin with. But no, that's great. Did you have anything else to add to the topic?
No, I think we covered it really well. I think that at this point, my mind is I think my mind is now going faster than my mouth, which is very rare for me. So I think for me, I think we'll catch you next time. I think this was a very interesting topic, and hopefully we could add some insight. And I know you offered me some insight, so thank you for that. And yeah, catch us anytime. If you would like, we'd love to. As you can tell, we do find a lot of value in hearing from the listeners, and so drop us a line, just hit the like, subscribe, and we will catch you next time.